Up until a couple weeks ago, everything on the channel has been shot with my trusty Canon 70D, but guys, it's time to step it up a notch. This thing has been extremely reliable and user-friendly, but when it comes to shooting video, it did leave a lot to be desired. Here, you're getting a 20.2 megapixel APS-C sensor with 19-point autofocus, but the thing about this camera that bugs me the most is the lack of 4K when shooting video. Here, we're limited to 1080p at 30 FPS, which would be okay if the video quality was superb, but it's just not. Especially in low light conditions, the Canon 70D really struggles and the result is lots of grain and noise in my footage. I mean, check this out. Here we're shooting at 1080p with ISO bumped up to 800 to maintain correct exposure, and even here the image is grainy and noisy. Enter the Sony a6300, my new 4K mirrorless beast of a camera, which will be shooting all of the footage on the channel for at least the next couple of years. For under $1,000 with the 16 to 50mm kit lens, it's hard to recommend anything else if you want to shoot 4K on a budget. I mean, even if I had the money to buy a Panasonic GH5 or Sony a7S II, I'd probably still get this, and I'll explain why in just a minute. The a6300, just like the 70D, sports an APS-C sized sensor, although Sony's APS-C sensor is a little bit bigger, with a crop factor of 1.5 versus Canon's 1.6. This is nowhere near as cropped as the Micro Four Thirds cameras such as the popular Panasonic G7 or GH4 or 5, with a crop factor of 2.0. Why is sensor size important? Well, as the name suggests, with a larger sensor you can capture more of the frame, whereas smaller sensors will capture less of the frame, meaning you'll need to compensate with a smaller focal length or with a lens adapter. And this is one of the main reasons I decided to go with the Sony a6300, as it has that native APS-C sensor, and if I'd gone with a Panasonic G series camera, I'd have to live with that crop factor of 2.0. Now, I know I could have slapped on the Metabone Speed Booster, which seems like the most popular solution currently, but with that painful price tag of $650 alone, it's a hard pill to swallow. Overall, when factoring in a Sigma art lens and an appropriate lens adapter, a Sony a6300 setup is going to come in at a much more budget-friendly price when compared to a Panasonic G series camera, and this is one of the main reasons that I picked it up. The a6300 does shoot up to 4K at 30 FPS and 1080p up to 120 FPS, both at a crispy 100 megabits per second. 99% of the time though, I'll be shooting in 4K at 24 FPS, but I may throw in some slow-mo footage at 1080p if I think the shot looks interesting. I've also found that the a6300 does produce a slightly sharper image as well when compared to the Panasonic G series, and this is due to the fact that it's actually capturing a massive 6K image and downsampling that to 4K. Click the card in the top right hand corner if you want to see that in action. Another feature that I was absolutely blown away with was the incredible autofocus system on the a6300 with a total of 425 autofocus points. It's fast, it's accurate, and it works exactly as you expect, and I'm so excited to start playing around with it because manual focus can really be a pain sometimes. I can't help but feel that when using manual focus that I've somehow overshot or undershot the focus ring, but with autofocus on the a6300, you know you're locked in 100%. And lastly, but probably the most important, is that low light performance, which the a6300 absolutely dominates. Take a look at this comparison here, for example, with my previous camera, the Canon 70D. Both have the same aperture, ISO, and focal length at 50mm, and here the noise and grain on the 70D feels cringy and hard to look at, whereas the a6300 is barely breaking a sweat. Not to mention the color on the 70D is way out of whack, despite using the same color temperature as well. I do believe that the a6300 beats out the Panasonic G series when it comes to low light performance as well, and you can check out Max Yuriev's channel in the top right hand corner and let me know what you guys think. I may be wrong. Now, I have shot a couple videos on the a6300, but be patient as I'm still dialing in those settings, and so far I have been absolutely blown away by this tiny kit lens that you can buy alongside it. I was planning on replacing it in a couple weeks, but I think I'm going to spend a little more time with it until the channel grows a little more. For only $150 you get a wide focal length range of 16mm all the way up to 50mm, and with that 1.5 crop factor, that's effectively 24mm up to 75mm. You also get Sony's OSS image stabilization, which may come in handy if I ever plan on doing anything handheld with the camera. This brings me to the next few talking points of the Sony a6300 and some of the main issues that a lot of people have with it. The first is the lack of in-body stabilization, meaning that if you're using the camera handheld and the lens that you're using doesn't have stabilization, you're going to have a bad time. Of course, you could just edit it in post, but it's just one more thing to worry about. Luckily, most of the work I'm going to be doing with this camera is going to be on a tripod and fluid head. The next gripe that many people have with the a6300 is the lack of a fully articulating LCD, which is pretty much standard now for Canon and Panasonic rivals. The screen has a good amount of tilt if you are shooting in high and low places, but if you're in front of the camera and want to check your framing, this becomes a big problem. Luckily, this isn't an issue for me because, well, I'm never in front of the camera, and you could solve this issue anyway with Sony's smartphone app or by using an external monitor. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't at least a little frustrating though. In this price bracket, it's just one of those features that you expect at this point. Now, let's talk overheating, because upon my initial research, I could tell that this was a problem that was turning away many potential buyers. At the moment, it is winter here in Australia, and average ambient temperatures are around 10 degrees Celsius, and I'm very happy to report that I've had zero overheating issues with the camera so far, not even the temperature warning sign. And yes, I have done a couple full shoots with it, which were my 2 previous videos. I am using Sony's latest firmware as well, which was just released a few weeks ago, and this essentially raises the temperature threshold where the a6300 would shut down. So there's that issue out of the way. Lastly, there's the issue with the SD card being stored underneath the camera, and not being stored on the side of the camera as you see here with the Canon 70D and also with the Panasonic G series. This is definitely not ideal for people who have small SD cards and for those shooting for multiple hours at a time. But my solution to this was just to buy a larger SD card than I normally would have, something that I'll only need to take out when I need to transfer files, and not swap out mid-shoot. Overall, I don't find that the issues with the a6300 are really relevant to myself as a content creator, always being behind the camera, always having the camera mounted, and shooting intermittently and not for extended periods of time. I'm a huge fan of the compact mirrorless form factor as well. I honestly didn't think I would have liked it coming from the classic DSLR size 70D, but after spending some time with it, I'm really loving it and can't wait to throw a beefy lens on this thing. So far, I'm absolutely loving the a6300 and I can't wait to dial in all of these settings and pair it with some beautiful lenses. I'm ready to take this channel to new heights, so thanks again to you guys, otherwise this never would have happened. Of course, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed if you want to see this thing in action. That's all from me guys. Of course, let me know what you think of the Sony a6300 and if you happen to have one. I'll catch you all in the next one.